What if the greatest mystery of history wasn't an island, but a warning hidden in plain sight? Atlantis wasn't carved in stone. It survived through centuries of ink and shadow. Today, we finally break the silence. If you are watching this right now, I want to ask you something. How much of history do you think is actually true? Because what you are about to hear was never meant to reach you. These are the classified files, the buried evidence, and the forbidden stories that powerful forces spent decades trying to erase. If you are someone who refuses to accept the official story, you are in the right place. Subscribe to the Dark History Files and join thousands of truth seekers uncovering what history tried to hide. Welcome back. This is the Dark History Files, and today we expose a truth that was never meant to be told. Long before Atlantis permeated modern discourse, it lived merely as ink upon parchment. The earliest accounts endured through diligent hands, copied across generations. These manuscripts migrated through private archives, secluded libraries, and distant civilizations. The legend was never etched into stone by the sea. Instead, it drifted quietly through history, surviving the rise and fall of empires within the permanence of the written word. Consider the experience of unrolling those ancient scrolls centuries ago. The pages bore the faint, stale scent of dust and aged vellum. In the flickering glow of an oil lamp, the hand-inked letters revealed a forgotten reality. To the reader, Atlantis was not a geographical coordinate, but a construct of the mind. The island and its lost depths materialized through imagination, transcending the limitations of sight. As centuries passed, the narrative persisted through the subtle labor of preservation. Scribes transcribed decaying texts, scholars reconciled conflicting accounts, translators adapted the tale for new tongues. With each transmission, the story shifted, finding resonance in evolving cultures. As voices faded and new readers emerged, a vast, unbroken chain of curiosity spanned the ages. The true marvel lies not in the question of the island's existence, but in the tenacity of our wonder. Across disparate eras, humanity remained tethered to the same enigmatic account. The narrative offered inquiries rather than resolution, inviting contemplation without requiring belief. Through shifting paradigms and beliefs, the story endured in the collective consciousness. Atlantis became more than a mere record of a sunken city. It became an enduring testament to the human compulsion to search beyond the horizon. The global phenomenon of Atlantis did not emerge as a baseless fable. It materialized within the discourse of the philosopher Plato. Through dialogue, he introduced the island as a relic of a vanished age, already steeped in antiquity when first committed to script. Atlantis surfaced not as a standalone myth, but as a centerpiece in inquiries regarding history, civilization, and human ambition. Plato delineated a lineage of transmission reaching deep into the past. He traced the account from Egyptian priests to the Athenian statesman Solon, who preserved the narrative within his own lineage before it reached the dialogues. Whether these links formed a genuine historical bridge or a deliberate literary structure remains ambiguous. Regardless, the process is compelling. Information traversing languages, borders, and centuries before crystallizing into text. Atlantis was depicted as a formidable power anchored beyond the known Mediterranean. Its society commanded immense wealth, influence, and architectural prowess. The narrative maintained a detached perspective, as if the events were viewed from a vast distance. Through incremental revelation, the cities, rulers, and landscapes took form, existing in the liminal space between memory and imagination. For successive generations, this framing proved profound. Atlantis was never presented as mere folklore or a sacred decree. Instead, it was embedded within philosophical treatises on governance, ethics, and the fragility of empires. This context demanded intellectual rigor, linking the island to universal questions concerning human conduct and the inevitable decline of great civilizations. As manuscripts traversed history, the Atlantis passages garnered singular attention. Certain readers scrutinized the text for political theory, while others fixated on the prospect of a tangible, lost geography. Over time, the narrative transcended its original binding. While the core dialogue remained static, the interpretations surrounding it underwent continuous expansion. The outcome was a striking paradox. A finite segment of text ignited centuries of relentless speculation. Readers engaged with the material through varying lenses, some seeking empirical evidence, others embracing its philosophical weight. Caught between these perspectives, Atlantis secured a permanent foothold in cultural memory, sustained not by evidence, but by the perpetual fascination of those who continued to read, reflect, and wonder. As the ancient world succumbed to the medieval dawn, countless records perished. Libraries were consumed by fire, structures crumbled, and conflicts dispersed once unified repositories of knowledge. Most texts vanished without a trace. Amidst this pervasive erasure, the survival of the Atlantis narrative represents a quieter, more resilient history. It persisted solely because dedicated hands chose to copy, preserve, and treasure manuscripts across the vast span of intervening centuries. The act of transcription demanded immense discipline. Scribes labored for hours, meticulously transferring text from one page to the next. Every line required unwavering focus. Minor errors risked distorting the record, while physical damage necessitated difficult editorial choices. This work proceeded at a measured, deliberate pace. Weeks often elapsed to complete a single volume. Through such disciplined routines, ancient wisdom navigated eras of instability to reach future generations. Throughout this epoch, Atlantis remained entombed within philosophical volumes. It rarely commanded central focus. Scholars approached Plato primarily to study his theories on justice, governance, and human nature. Yet, amidst those dense pages, the account of Atlantis lingered in silence. A researcher searching for one truth might unexpectedly encounter the legend, thereafter preserving it through memory, discourse, or a fresh transcription. As intellectual inquiry revived, these texts crossed new cultural boundaries. Greek works were translated and maintained by scholars of disparate traditions. Each circulation bolstered the narrative's chances of survival. The story permeated academic networks spanning generations, transcending political upheaval and the shifting centers of power, remaining ever-present even as the surrounding world underwent profound transformation. The physical manuscripts endured their own arduous odysseys. Some resided in monastic cloisters. Others were secured in the private collections of elite patrons. A single manuscript might occupy a shelf for decades before beginning a new journey. Over time, pages yellowed, bindings fractured, and margins filled with the annotations of readers separated by centuries. These inscriptions prove that the texts were never static relics, but living participants in a continuous dialogue between the past and the present. This slow transmission ensured that Atlantis survived not through singular, dramatic events, but through a series of mundane acts of preservation. One reader shielded a manuscript, another commissioned a duplicate, a third translated challenging passages for a new audience. Though none could foresee the global reach this story would eventually attain, their collective labor propelled an ancient fragment across an immense gulf of time. The legend remained anchored to a sea of handwritten pages, drifting steadily toward readers yet to be born. With the dawn of the printing press, the trajectory of ancient narratives shifted. Manuscripts, once rare artifacts of laborious creation, became replicable. As Plato's dialogues entered this era of mass production, the Atlantis account transcended its original, restricted circle. What was once confined to select archives surged outward, reaching a broader, more diverse audience. Readers encountered the legend under transformed circumstances. No longer reliant on the silent seclusion of libraries, they accessed printed editions with unprecedented ease. Scholars, merchants, and the curious alike gained entry to texts previously shrouded in obscurity. Atlantis migrated into discourse far removed from its origins, adapting seamlessly to a rapidly expanding intellectual landscape. The Age of Discovery added a layer of profound intrigue. As vessels traversed uncharted oceans and maps underwent constant revision, the world seemed to widen. Reports of exotic lands reached European shores, rendering a narrative of a lost, distant island particularly resonant. Many began to question whether the vestiges of Atlantis might lie somewhere within the vast, emerging frontiers of the globe. Interest intensified, fueled not by empirical discovery, but by an expanding sense of uncertainty. Every voyage hinted at hidden realities. Every newly charted coastline invited conjecture. Atlantis became a focal point for the innate human impulse to project imagination beyond the horizon. The legend dwelled in the liminal space between recorded history and unexplored potential, commanding the attention of all who pursued mystery. Simultaneously, scholars scrutinized the primary sources. They interrogated translations and debated the context of Plato's original intent. Some classified Atlantis as an allegorical device, while others suspected the influence of ancient, fragmented traditions. These inquiries spanned generations, yielding no definitive resolution. Yet, this persistent ambiguity only served to sustain global fascination. By this era, the story had far outpaced its ancient genesis. It permeated universities, private studies, and public discourse. Readers from disparate backgrounds drew varied conclusions from the same pages. Some perceived a historical enigma, others an enduring lesson in narrative survival. Throughout the shifting centuries, the tale's journey continued, sustained not by maritime conquest, but by the relentless human compulsion to revisit an old mystery and ponder what lies beyond. The original words introducing Atlantis remain deceptively brief when measured against their colossal historical shadow. One can traverse those foundational passages in mere moments, yet they have ignited centuries of inquiry, investigation, and imaginative odyssey. The contrast is stark. A fleeting fragment of ancient writing has evolved into the most persistent enigma of the deep past. Its endurance stems from the singular manner of its transmission. Most encounter Atlantis through layers of cultural interpretation rather than the primary texts. Through literature, media, and discourse, the legend absorbs new fragments, extending a chain that has spanned millennia. The tale propagates from voice to voice, mirroring its earlier journey from manuscript to manuscript. This process remains profoundly evocative. While countless ancient narratives vanished alongside their cultures, Atlantis followed a divergent path. It remained visible enough to invite obsession, yet sufficiently opaque to defy definitive explanation. Readers revisit the same lines, only to unearth fresh questions. The legend refuses to settle into a static, universally accepted interpretation. Viewed from this vantage, the Chronicle of Atlantis is as much a history of preservation as it is a study of myth. The island's reality may be elusive, but the survival of the account is absolute. Generations have inherited, scrutinized, and passed the narrative forward. This transmission never relied upon a solitary culture or era. Rather, it blossomed through countless individual moments of reflection across the ages. Before debating the location or existence of Atlantis, one must pause to consider the journey of the story itself. From ancient dialogues to the printed page, it has traversed an immense temporal expanse. Long after its authors vanished, their words journeyed onward. Like a vessel defying the currents of time, the narrative endured. It reaches the present not because it offered resolution, but because human curiosity proved robust enough to sustain the voyage. As we leave the mystery of the parchment behind, we must step into the world that actually birthed these words. To understand the legend, we must first walk the vibrant, chaotic streets of ancient Greece, where the story was born from the minds of philosophers. Ancient Greece was never a singular, unified realm, but a constellation of cities carved into mountains, valleys, and rugged coastlines. Sun-drenched stone structures defined its architecture, while narrow thoroughfares linked bustling harbors and public forums. The sea invited constant movement, serving as a conduit for goods, travelers, and intelligence. Ideas drifted along these maritime arteries, passing between communities through the relentless exchange of discourse across the Mediterranean. A visitor to a Greek marketplace was enveloped in a sensory tapestry. The clamor of traders haggling over wares mingled with the tales of sailors recounting distant voyages. Aromas of olive oil, fresh bread, and fruit permeated the air, while sunlight danced against bronze and stone, casting shifting shadows upon the crowds. Legends circulated through these spaces as freely as trade goods, woven into the very fabric of daily existence. Over generations, the Greek world cultivated a hunger for documentation. Poets performed ancestral traditions, while writers transformed oral histories into enduring literature. Thinkers challenged established norms, and mentors gathered pupils to dissect new philosophies. Knowledge migrated from fleeting memory into the permanence of ink. Within this climate, stories gained a new life, transcending the moment of performance to reach audiences long after the original speaker vanished. To the people of ancient Greece, stories were more than mere diversion. They served as mirrors for human nature, power, and the mysteries of the wider world. A tale from antiquity could bridge eras, offering profound reflection in place of simple answers. In this intellectual landscape, legends found a receptive home. The saga of Atlantis grew from this fertile tradition, a society that prized curiosity, dialogue, and the rigorous examination of ideas carried across both land and sea. The world that birthed the legend of Atlantis was forged in discourse. Throughout ancient Greece, public forums served as crucibles for ideas, drawing merchants, travelers, and citizens alike. Conversations often veered from the practical to the profound, bridging the gap between daily life and philosophical inquiry. In this environment, stories were not isolated artifacts. They flowed through the collective consciousness as a vital cultural rhythm. Greek society revered the spoken word. Long before the era of widespread literacy, knowledge thrived through memory and performance. Epics were recited, arguments debated in assemblies, and philosophy nurtured through dialectic. Attentive listening was a hallmark of refinement. In this tradition, a narrative's survival was guaranteed by those who continuously refined, adapted, and reflected upon its core truths. Storytelling transcended mere entertainment. Narratives functioned as vessels for societal reflection, Tales of heroes examined valor, while chronicles of rulers interrogated ambition and duty. Listeners were challenged to decipher underlying meaning, fostering a landscape where imagination and critical thought intersected seamlessly. Simultaneously, the rise of philosophical inquiry redefined intellectual life. Thinkers began to deconstruct themes of justice, governance, and human conduct, favoring reasoned argument over unexamined tradition. This shift did not marginalize storytelling. Rather, it elevated it. Narratives became instruments for exploring complexity, grounding abstract concepts in vivid, accessible imagery. The sea, too, dictated this culture of exchange. Maritime routes connected Greece to the wider world, facilitating constant contact with foreign lands. Sailors returned with accounts of distant shores, where reports often blurred the lines between observation and myth. With each retelling, the mundane transformed into the extraordinary, allowing faraway places to acquire an almost mythical stature. Within this ecosystem of dialogue and inquiry, stories gained remarkable resilience. They traversed generations, evolving for new audiences while retaining their essence. The society that eventually chronicled Atlantis was primed for such a tale. It was a culture that championed memory, welcomed skepticism, and remained perpetually fixated on the mysteries dwelling beyond the horizon. Ancient Greek pedagogy flourished through personal mentorship rather than rigid institutions. Learning was a process of auditory transmission, sustained by observation, dialogue, and sustained reflection. Students engaged with poetry, mathematics, and governance, seeking to reconcile the human condition with the complexities of the world. As the written word gained prominence, scrolls emerged as vital conduits of wisdom. Reading was rarely a solitary act. Texts were vocalized, transforming the written page into a catalyst for communal discourse. The distinction between reading and speaking remained porous, anchoring intellectual life in a dynamic, shared experience. Philosophers occupied a unique space, challenging consensus and championing critical inquiry. Rather than dictating final truths, they preferred the Socratic method of dialogue. By juxtaposing disparate viewpoints, they cultivated a tolerance for uncertainty. A narrative's worth was measured not by its resolution, but by the intellectual curiosity it provoked. Greek thinkers were deeply preoccupied with the rise and collapse of civilizations. They scrutinized the mechanisms of prosperity, political instability, and the cyclical nature of power. Whether grounded in history or legend, these narratives served as case studies, offering profound insight into the forces that dictate the destiny of empires. Storytelling proved an essential tool for exploring the contours of human nature. By shifting the focus to a distant setting, authors enabled audiences to transcend contemporary bias. While the backdrop of a tale might be remote, its themes, ambition, leadership, and fallibility, remained timelessly resonant. This intellectual climate provided the fertile ground from which Atlantis would emerge. The society was already adept at weaving observation with abstraction. They approached narratives as multi-layered exercises in thought. Consequently, the account of a lost civilization functioned as a versatile vessel, part historical relic, part philosophical warning, and part myth. This inherent flexibility ensured the legend would endure, captivating minds long after the island itself faded into the shadows of memory. Beyond the urban centers, the Greek world was a realm of perpetual encounter. Merchant vessels traversed vast distances, linking distant colonies to the mainland. Travelers returned with accounts of foreign customs and uncharted landscapes, expanding geographical horizons and igniting curiosity regarding lands beyond direct reach. Cartography remained in its infancy, leaving much of the world to the realm of possibility. Knowledge thinned with distance, transitioning from familiar coastlines to regions defined by fragmented reports and hearsay. This uncertainty invited the imagination to bridge the gap between observation and the unknown. Where definitive knowledge vanished, speculation thrived. The sea acted as a conduit rather than a boundary. While voyages offered the promise of discovery, they also carried the risk of tempest and the unforeseen. The horizon constantly hinted at truths hidden from view, and every return fueled the collective understanding of a vast, expanding world. Myths thrived within this atmosphere of exploration. Narratives frequently located the extraordinary just beyond the veil of the familiar, because audiences acknowledged the existence of regions they had never traversed. They could easily conceive of these legendary locales. The void between known geography and the unknown served as the bedrock of their storytelling. Legends did not challenge reality. They merely filled the spaces where certainty had not yet arrived. Simultaneously, Greek culture remained anchored to memory. Ancestral legacies, founding struggles, and historical milestones were preserved through oral traditions, binding the present to a deeper identity. Whether accounts were strictly historical or laden with symbolism mattered less than their ability to preserve meaning across time. When Atlantis surfaced in Greek literature, it entered a society already attuned to the concepts of distant civilizations and vanished eras. The notion of a formidable power lurking beyond the horizon was no anomaly. It mirrored established patterns of thought cultivated by travel and inquiry. Within this cultural framework, the narrative existed in a liminal space, neither mundane nor impossible, where imagination and reflection converged to challenge the boundaries of experience. Reflecting on the centuries, ancient Greece emerges as more than a mere cluster of ruins. It was a landscape of ideas, woven through dialogue, performance, and the written word. Knowledge flowed through marketplaces, hearths, and harbors, fostering a culture where curiosity reigned supreme. Intellectual life was not confined to a single sanctuary. It thrived wherever minds converged to bridge memory with imagination. This setting was defined by the synthesis of diverse traditions. Empiricism existed alongside myth. Historical records shared ground with philosophical inquiry. Rather than compartmentalizing these influences, Greek culture allowed them to coalesce. Ideas transitioned seamlessly between modes of expression, cultivating a dynamic environment where narratives could evolve and flourish. The legend of Atlantis drew strength from this flexibility. A narrative could be prized for its drama while simultaneously provoking deeper contemplation. Readers did not demand a strict dichotomy between fact and fiction. Instead, stories acted as gateways to broader inquiries. This elasticity granted narratives a depth that ensured their resonance across generations. Ancient Greece cultivated an enduring reverence for inquiry. Thinkers scrutinized the rise and fall of societies, seeking patterns within the human experience. Tales became essential companions in this pursuit, providing frameworks to examine abstract themes from varied perspectives. Often, a narrative revealed truths that direct argument alone could never articulate. While the physical vestiges of daily Greek life have succumbed to time, the intellectual habits forged within that world endured. The commitment to questioning, discussing, and reflecting became a legacy transcending the Mediterranean. This heritage proved pivotal for the survival of Atlantis. Before a legend could be immortalized in text, a culture had to be primed to receive it. Greece provided that foundation. The story of Atlantis was born of a civilization deeply committed to memory and exploration. Its survival is not merely a product of mystery, but a testament to a culture that understood the enduring power of a story and the profound questions it leaves in its wake. Beyond the philosophical debates and the bustling harbors of the Greeks, there lies a visual reality that has haunted explorers for generations. It is time to move from the abstract thoughts of philosophers to the concrete, mesmerizing geometry of the island itself. Beyond known horizons, ancient accounts delineate Atlantis as an island defined by an intricate interplay of land and water. Expansive plains receded from the coast toward a distant mountain range. At its core lay a city of singular design, structured in concentric rings of earth and sea. Canals encircled the settlement, establishing a geometry unseen elsewhere in the ancient world. Harbors breached the outer perimeter, while artificial waterways facilitated transit across the interior. A traveler approaching these shores would first hear the rhythmic surge of water through the canals. Gentle waves lapped against stone, surging toward the inner ports. The atmosphere held the sharp scent of salt, mingled with the fragrance of inland harvests. Sunlight played across the shifting currents, casting an ephemeral brilliance that evolved with the sun's arc. Vessels navigated the circular channels, each turn offering a new perspective of the unfolding landscape. Toward the heart of the island, a complex network of connections sustained the city. Farmers traversed the fertile ring, while maritime traders moved from the open sea into sheltered docks. Goods converged inward, and bridges linked every concentric boundary into a unified whole. The city's architecture directed the flow of life. Every canal served as a corridor, and every span united disparate spaces into a singular, coordinated expanse. These descriptions possess a distinct, contemplative gravity. Atlantis feels simultaneously tangible and elusive. Its harbors and fields mirror the structures of human civilization, yet their arrangement suggests something spectral. The circular design compels the imagination to trace each layer of the mystery. Whether Atlantis stood as a physical reality or a visionary construct, the image preserved in antiquity remains a landscape observed with precision and shrouded in silence. Delving deeper into the ancient narrative, the topography of Atlantis emerges with refined precision. The island was defined by a vast, fertile plain, a sweeping expanse that demarcated the cultivated heartland from the encircling sea. This terrain was not merely a product of nature, but a testament to generations of human industry. Roads, waterways, and agricultural sectors functioned as a cohesive, interconnected lattice of life and production. The flanking mountains served as a majestic boundary. Rising in the distance, they cradled the lowlands, housing forests and springs that sustained the island. Water descended from these slopes, nourishing the productive regions stretching toward the coast. Thus, the landscape appeared tiered, with the elevated highlands feeding the coastal plains in a delicate, balanced hierarchy. Water remained the lifeblood of Atlantis. Canals were not mere features of chance, but intentional arteries integrated into the city's design. These waterways facilitated the transit of goods and inhabitants, uniting harbors, fields, and urban centers into a singular, fluid system. Their persistent presence bound the disparate sections of the island together with rhythmic connectivity. At the epicenter stood the island's most enigmatic feature, alternating rings of land and sea. Bridges spanned these channels, enabling transit across the concentric zones. Viewed from above, the city's geometry defied all Mediterranean norms. This unique layout remains indelible, forcing the reader to visualize the circles expanding outward, an architectural phantom in the mind's eye. The harbor districts functioned as vital gateways. Sheltered from the open ocean, these ports served as conduits for commerce and communication, signaling a society deeply embedded in maritime networks. Rather than an isolated relic, Atlantis was depicted as a global nexus, actively trading and engaging with the world beyond its periphery. These details coalesce into a portrait of a meticulously structured environment. Mountains, plains, canals, and ports each played a part in the grander scheme. The narrative invites the reader to traverse this terrain, mapping how each element relies upon the next. Before the debates of history or archaeology intervene, the ancient text offers something more fundamental, a vivid geographical vision, bridging the threshold between natural majesty and human design. Traversing this envisioned landscape, the agricultural expanse gradually reveals itself. Ancient accounts exalt its fertility, where rich soil met meticulous stewardship. The plain was partitioned into structured sectors, reflecting a deliberate harmony between the terrain and its stewards. Crops thrived across vast, managed tracts, irrigated by a network of channels that sustained the populace. Roads intersected these fields, binding the island's disparate regions. Travelers navigated a shifting topography, transitioning from open harvests to dense, interconnected settlements. These arteries served not only commerce and communication, but defined the visual rhythm of the plain, etching lines of purpose across the fertile vista. Beyond the fields, the narrative reveals evidence of sophisticated craftsmanship. Stone foundations, walls, and public works imply a society mastered in large-scale engineering. Bridges spanned critical junctions, while canals directed the flow of water with calculated precision. Such infrastructure suggests a civilization driven by a singular, ordered vision, projecting authority upon the natural world. The city occupied a position of unique prominence. Progressing inward through the concentric districts, the environment transformed from utilitarian space to a theater of administration and ceremony. This radial design enforced a sense of progression, with every waterbound ring creating a distinct threshold between the outer reaches and the island's core. Ancient chroniclers also noted monumental temples dominating the central districts. Though their exact form remains lost to time, these structures were clearly intended to command reverence. Their stature added a transcendent layer to the landscape. Atlantis was not merely a center of industry, but a society that invested deeply in the architectural symbols of its collective identity. In retrospect, the island appears as a study in balance, utility matched by design. Productive fields, maritime arteries, and monumental architecture converge into a cohesive whole. This geography feels intentional, never accidental. Whether rooted in history or born of myth, Atlantis remains a place where human ambition and the natural world are inextricably woven, a vision that has haunted human memory for centuries. The coastline of Atlantis remains a subtle yet compelling facet of the ancient narrative. While the central metropolis commands focus, the island was anchored within an expansive maritime domain. At the periphery, the interface between sea and land fostered a dynamic environment. Here, oceanic swells met beaches and rugged promontories, serving as both a threshold and a gateway to the unknown. Harbors anchored this coastal geography. Ancient accounts detail sheltered inlets facilitating the flow of vessels. These were the island's pulse, a nexus where sailors readied for departure, merchants traded, and voyagers arrived with tidings from abroad. The rhythm here contrasted with the pastoral interior. It was a place where local life intersected with the breadth of the world. Beyond the shore lay the sea, a potent symbol in Mediterranean consciousness, embodying both promise and peril. The Atlantean narrative depicts a society intrinsically bound to the water. Their canals, ports, and naval mastery reflect a civilization for whom the sea was not merely a boundary to be observed, but an active, indispensable component of existence. The topography suggests a landscape of immense bounty. Forests provided timber for fleets, mountain springs fed the lowlands, fertile soil fueled agricultural success, and coastal access enabled commerce. These elements converged to generate a prosperity rooted in geography, with diverse environments complementing one another to fortify the society's foundation. As daylight shifted, the island's character transformed. Morning sun might catch the distant peaks while leaving the ports in shadow. By midday, light danced across the winding canals. At dusk, the coast softened as vessels returned to harbor. Though the text remains restrained in its descriptions, these visual sequences emerge naturally to those who reconstruct the landscape within their mind. What becomes undeniable is the immense scale of Atlantis. It was no mere settlement, but a vast, interconnected island world. The interplay of fields, mountains, waterways, and urban sectors forms a grand geographical mosaic. As one traces these features, the legend sheds the limitations of a single city, revealing instead a fully realized landscape forged by nature and defined by the hands of those who inhabited it. As this conceptual traversal of Atlantis concludes, the island's disparate features coalesce into a unified whole. Canals integrate seamlessly with coastal harbors, while roads radiate toward fertile plains cradled by distant mountains. No element exists in isolation. The ancient narrative depicts a world where geography, settlement, and transit are inextricably linked, forming a landscape of functional, meticulous design. The enduring power of Atlantis lies within this sense of wholeness. The account describes not merely a city, but an entire ecosystem. Readers encounter waterways, farmlands, architecture, and coastlines, all woven into a singular vision. Even those who dispute the island's historical existence concede the vividness of its setting. Regardless of interpretation, the physical landscape remains unforgettable. The central circular city commands the most profound focus. Its concentric rings of land and water create a pattern distinct from any other ancient settlement. The design compels the mind to travel inward, layer by layer, toward the island's urban heart. Few details have captured the collective imagination with such potency. It remains the most iconic image within the entire legend. Yet, the broader topography merits equal regard. The fertile plains provide sustenance, the mountains offer boundary and resource, and the harbors bridge the island to the world beyond. Each feature contributes to a state of equilibrium. Atlantis appears neither untamed nor overly constrained, existing in a liminal space where natural form and human intent converge in perfect alignment. This is why the image of Atlantis continues to incite reflection. It is sufficiently remote to remain enigmatic, yet detailed enough to seem within reach. One can easily envision the shoreline, the transit over a canal, or the view across the plains toward the jagged peaks. The landscape demands quiet observation rather than spectacle, revealing its secrets in a measured, deliberate unfolding. Before the inquiries of catastrophe or historical truth arise, there exists this meticulously described realm beyond the horizon. Ancient chroniclers bequeathed an image of an island forged by water, earth, and design. Whether anchored in reality or born of myth, this landscape has traversed the ages. It endures as the most haunting geographical vision in legend, inviting each generation to wander through its canals, fields, and distant shores once more. You have mapped the island, but the true mystery isn't where it stood. It is why it had to fall. The catalysts of catastrophe are hidden deep within the records, and the first signs of the end are beginning to emerge. Join me for the next investigation in just 48 hours.